Okay, now it's recording in the right place. So, welcome to the front of the room, everybody. So, if you're, I know like this, it's a narrow little channel down the middle here. I wish we had an auditorium. Like that would just be nice, just to be able to go sit in a room and have a conversation, away from these distracting screens. So, if you're sitting in front of a screen, I know a few people are kind of finishing the last minute things and putting their files up there. If you're done, just hit the little power button on your monitor to turn it off. That way we can all be together as a group. Um, we're going to look at these today. Again, like I wish we could do it like a full critique in here. You're going to get more of those as you go along in digital media. You may not enjoy those, but they're actually very helpful, and it's something that we kind of learn to hopefully learn to utilize. What I'm going to do today is we're going to kind of watch through these as a group and just talk about some of the issues you had, and ways that we can kind of fix them, like things that you can run into. I got a lot of kind of late emails on Sunday. I was able to reply to most of them if I kind of understood the question, or if I wasn't like it's the weekend for me too. I don't like sit in front of the computer all weekend if I can keep from it. I try to get most of stuff done during the week. So most of you are probably getting typo-filled messages from my phone as responses, and vague guesses about what the problems were. So hopefully everybody's got something pretty much done. We're going to talk about some of the issues in a minute here, but first I wanted to look at the project write-up one more time. How many of you refer back to this? Anybody? Cool. That means it's doing its job. That's really what it's here for, is for you to refer back to. The biggest thing I wanted to look at is sort of the grading criteria. Just by looking at this, you can usually get an idea of how this is going to turn out for you in terms of grades, just by thinking about your own, right? So you modeled some objects. Modeling, did you model some objects? Did they turn out pretty good? Good job. Lighting and rendering, that's including some texture work, right? Did you get it rendered? Did you get the materials looking okay? This one's one that I put a little bit more emphasis on texturing, just so you get a little bit of time in that and a little bit more emphasis on lighting. Just because when these turn out really well lit and rendered, like they look really impressive. Like a strong piece in this will sometimes pull a lot of weight at midpoint review, which we're going to be talking about, I think, next class period. So the serial simulation, did your serial simulate? I'm not like, did every piece make it into the bowl? But does it look like you got some form of appropriate simulation on your serial? The coffee simulation, do you have some form of steam? And then overall presentation, just how did it pull together, right? All of that stuff could be perfect if we're looking at it from a quarter mile away. It's not presenting well, right? The last thing that's not in here, but I will make a note as I'm grading it, is did you, like, part of the instruction says, bring one of these objects to life. I'm going to use that as an extra credit piece. So if you did that, I will basically just add a point to one of these categories, and I'll make a note in there and say, bumped it up from 3 to 4 because you animated this or something like that, right? It's because this one starts to get a little heavier on everything except keyframing, and some of you are probably really enjoying the keyframing part, so I wanted you to have some more time on that. So, okay. So let's chat a little bit. What was some of the problems you all ran into?
My cereal, even after I set the end cloth, it kept coming out of the bowl at the bottom. Like, not like running out, but like getting much.
Oh, like it kind of like clashed together, like sort of, did it puddle together and like one, like it looks like the cereal pieces were going through each other?
No, it was, you'll see it when it starts, just like, it's like inching out of the bowl.
Okay. So a couple of things can happen there. I've seen this in the past. Some people who've had their cereal looks like it's coming out of the box just a little bit. Like you can see, not that it blows out through the box, that it's like the cereal's coming through it just a little bit. You just see a whole bunch of little cereal dots all over your box. Some of that is your collision thickness. So if think of it this way: the size your object actually is in Maya is not by default the size that is being simulated, right? What's being simulated is that little bitty point for each particle. And that's sometimes much smaller than your actual object. So if that point collides with your bowl or with your cereal box or whatever, sometimes your cereal can actually still be going through the bowl. So that's why we did that collision object thickness. I think it's what it was, collider thickness, I think is the thing. That can make sure that it's colliding big enough. It could either be that, or it could be recognize that when we have an object inside of Maya. Let me open Maya so I can use this as an example. I saw this happening with a few people. The thing that collision object is going to be colliding with is your lowest subdivision or your lowest smooth of your object, right? So what I saw some people had was something like, let's do this really quick. Is that mine? There we go. Their bowl was this, right? But when you hit 3 on this, it turns it into this, right? What Maya is actually going to simulate this object colliding with is this, not this, right? So some of you may have ran into that. If that's the case, there's actually ways of turning it permanently into this instead of temporarily. And so if some of you had that issue, one of the ways you can do that is mesh and then smooth. And now it's actually that, and you can actually turn your subdivisions up too to make it even smoother. If you go up too high, it's going to start getting slow, right? And so this is the unsmoothed version of it, right? If I hit the smoothed version of it, you don't actually really see that much of a difference because all the pieces are really small. So that might have been what was happening as well. I noticed that with just a few people. And that's that was sort of a slight oversight of on my part to kind of mention how to get like you need enough resolution in your lowest version or lowest subdivision version of your model for Maya to collide with that. So other issues. What's some other things you all ran into? You all kind of raised your hands simultaneously, so I'll let you find it out.
I had a couple of objects on my scene that just didn't render, and they did have materials and textures assigned to them, or actually just materials. But like they were like looking fine in the viewport, and then when I rendered it and checked out my render later, they just weren't there.
What was the what were they?
It was a plate that my food was sitting on, and just a cup that were in the scene, and they were both copper material with the AI standard surface assigned to them.
And you rendered with Arnold?
Yeah.
Huh. So, I'm not sure. I'd have to look at that. So there's a couple of things that can cause your object to not show up. One can be if you have a new material, let's do AI standard surface. It's under geometry, this opacity. And so if that opacity is all the way to black, by default it's going to render unless you go in here to P cube shape 1 and hit that. And so now it's completely opaque, or it's completely invisible, and even though I can see it in my viewport here, it will render as invisible. So one of the things that could be, I don't know, it could be that there's something in that chrome. You say chrome or copper?
It was
Copper. There could be something in one of those copper presets that's causing that to happen. Copper is There's also another thing in your material that may be happening, which is your metalness and your index of refraction. Both of these will make the object super reflective, and so if an object is super reflective, but all it's reflecting is a white room, then sometimes it just reflects white, and it's hard to see it if it's not on an object, but it doesn't sound like that's the issue.
No, I actually specifically turned the index of refraction and the roughness like to where, it almost doesn't really look like metal anymore because it was reflecting way too much.
Yeah.
So I don't really know what it is.
Yeah, let's look at that. I feel like a couple of people had some object. Did anybody else have some objects that just didn't seem to render? All right, I feel like I heard some else say something. John, I thought John, is yours just like it's too transparent? Or?
Yeah, it was just, I don't know, it's just a single circle. It just didn't come out in the render, textured and everything.
Huh. Yeah, we'll kind of look into that. I'd like to look at the file and see if I can help you figure that part out. Yes.
One of my textures, it's of a newspaper, and I worked on it for several days, and I just ignored it because I didn't need to do anything for it one time, and then by the end, there were little rectangles all over the texture that were missing for no reason, and I had it copied several times, and every single copy was the exact same way, but I hadn't took the texture off or unset my project, or it was always in the exact same place, and it shows up in the render.
Oh, just in the viewport it looks weird?
No, it shows up in the render and the viewport.
Oh, the little invisible spots.
It's so strange, but it fills it in with other parts of the newspaper in the render.
So, you remember when we were talking about deleting history on objects? So there are things that you can do to your object when you're unwrapping it, when you're doing your UVs, right? That sort of get tangled up with the history of how it was created. And so when you move your object or when you do something to it, sometimes the history will mess up your UVs again. And so one of the ways to do that is make sure you're deleting history a lot. It sounds like it may have been something to do with that. It's probably still pretty salvageable. We just have to get the UVs correct again and make sure that they're showing up correctly.
So it is just a flat square. I could probably just replace it again.
Yeah. Other issues y'all can have?
So one, I had a lot of issues just because I'm not good at any of the stuff that we have to do for this project. You know this.
You're fine at this.
Yeah.
Y'all. How many of you were born able to use Maya? Anybody? It's okay to be like that. This is actually what learning should feel like. So yes.
But with the background, like when you're playing like the Sky Dome and everything, I tried to figure out how to fix it, but like it worked. It happened with every image I tried to use, but it was applying it as if it was like pushing it and not actually like wrapping it around. It was like on the inside of the circle, pushing it against it instead of like on the outside.
Were you using the HDRIs from up on the network, or were you just using a regular image?
I used a regular image before that I found just because that was the one I wanted to use because I wanted the colors to correlate and stuff, and nothing that was in the folder I really wanted, but that one didn't work, so I was like, okay, I'll try the one that they provide for me, and it did the exact same thing, and I tried to adjust it and everything, and it wasn't working, and then my render looks really bad because it looks like it's going too fast. Like the actual animation is going too fast, but when I was trying to like check the render view and everything, it was taking too long to show up. Like it would take minutes just for like a little pixel to show up, and I was just like, and I like tried closing out Maya and doing it again, and it would do the same thing, and it would just like freeze up. So when I decided to render it, I expected it to take like more than 2 days because of how long it was going to show up in the Arnold render view, and then when it actually rendered, I think it's just like the camera is moving too fast because the actual like thing that we're being graded on looks fine. It's just like the camera's doing like this, like it just wraps around way too quick, and it was just like, oh no, why'd you do that? Like you rendered quickly, like when I actually rendered it, but it wasn't doing anything as I was trying to like, go back and forth to see if everything was looking okay. I gave up.
A similar issue the text from Sky Dome, like it wrapped around, but it didn't look right.
Yeah, it was like in the
Yeah,
wrong
my background is blurry.
Like no matter, like on the first project, I did a Sky Dome, and when I had it wrapped around, there was when I was at the midpoint, it looked flat.
Mhm.
But on this one, I tried multiple different images. Every single one of them, it looked like it was an image that was wrapped around the inside of something, rather than looking
the
flat like it's supposed to. Like, yeah, it's just like no matter what I did, the angle would not look right. It always looked like my stuff was just floating there.
Mine's floating. That's how I know my table is floating. But like every background I tried to use was blurry, and that was because it looked like it was being pushed forward and not like pushed back to where it's like, hey, that's a background. You can visibly see what it's supposed to be. But this one, it was just like, boom, it's here, and it doesn't look good. But I couldn't get it to look good.
Well, so some of those things sound like they maybe are just how Maya works. Like if it's like a Sky Dome image is supposed to wrap around it, it's never really supposed to seem flat behind it, because it is on a sphere. Like the Sky Dome is just a sphere that's the world around it, and it's not always like in this case we kind of use it to be a background image, but in real life, in most real productions, you're just using it to get a real world lighting scenario. So you would still create like the rest of the kitchen in the background. So if that part's feeling a little stretched, I'm not too worried about that for the project. But yeah, like a lot of these I think are going to be like one-on-one kind of looking at it and seeing what's happening there. I can't answer the animation one because it kind of messes you up a little bit because we're setting this to your playback speed of play every frame max real time. And so that means if your scene is really heavy, it will play it really slow, right? And so if you're watching it play it back really slow and thinking that's the actual speed of the animation, then you may animate your camera too fast, or you may animate your spoon too fast, and then when you actually render it, it'll play back really, really quick. That's one of the reasons we did play blasts early on. If you right click here and do a play blast of this, you should be able to see what the actual speed of the animation is. Or you can do your playback speed and set it to real time. Your serial will mess up, like it won't be the appropriate serial simulation, but you'll be able to see the actual speed of what things should be. A lot of times you have to play blast stuff out just because scenes will start getting really heavy, and it's really slow to work with. Yes.
That's actually like mine ended up being a lot longer than it needs to be,
Mhm.
and it ends up sitting there and just kind of pouring. So you saw that because when I did it in real time, it was taking forever for the cereal to pour out, and what ended up happening in real time with the cereal pouring into the bowl is not what happens in the render.
Okay.
It takes way longer playing it in the workspace in Maya than it actually does in the render to fill up the bowl.
That's interesting. It should be the same amount if you're caching the cereal, but if you're not, and I think you said it didn't look like you were because you were able to still scroll and skip it. It should bake it in at that. So if you wanted it to happen at the rate it was in Maya, you'd cache it out, and then it should happen exactly like it does in the render.
I guess it's pretty bad.
So this one was a hard one, huh?
I think a unique example of a broken man. Just watch my project. You'll get that feeling. It's kind of not what I was going for, but what's ended up happening.
So this went through a lot at you. I realized that in this project, I'm actually like kind of in the works of trying to scale it back a little bit. The things I'm going to cut out are probably some of the modeling, and I've already kind of reduced that a little bit for you. But I think this one's where it really starts hitting home, like how much goes into this. All the issues you're having right now, like it's hard for me as a teacher because I really want to empathize and be like, I'm sorry, it's okay. But this is actually how you get good at this is by fighting with these things. And so this one's, I think this one also always hits at a really hard time during the semester. So the reassuring thing I will say actually, I'll say several reassuring things. Um, is that 21 of you still have files up there, right? You turn something in, right? I'm guessing this is probably almost everybody in the class. You turn something in, and that means you can revise this until the last day of class. I think it's December 13th, right? You can, or whatever our last day is, maybe December 12th. You can turn in over and over and over and over again as many times as you want to, right? Your first time finishing a project is rarely your first time finishing a project, or your last time finishing a project. You'll experience this a lot in that you know, everything's working perfect, and you go to render it, and you're like, what in the world is that? And there's something that makes you re-render it, or makes you like have to go back and change the animation. And that's just because this is an iterative process. So you have a version in here. I would encourage you to not think of this as your last version, right? Just because the due date came does not mean you have to be done with it. In fact, the real due date has not completely came yet. Like what this is really for, what this entire class is for, is to prepare you for midpoint review. So some of you have a year left to make this thing incredible, right? And that's how this should hopefully always feel to you. This should never feel like a test. This should never feel like you got it wrong or you got it right. Because there is no right. Like there's lots of wrongs, right? There's lots of things that are not successful when you're watching or when you're looking at a piece of visual art, right? But there's no like correct answer. There's like an infinite number of correct answers to this. And so your job is just to keep working on it until you get the one you like. At 8 o'clock in the morning after working on this all weekend, I'm sure some of you are exhausted or just tired of this project and they're like, could we just burn it instead? That's not always the advice you want to hear. Is like, oh, you're not finished yet. Like that doesn't always sound reassuring. How you should hear this is like, you are not. It's not that you're not happy with this. It's that you're not happy with this yet, right? You can make this better. Having said that, every time I've ever not every time. Most of the time I come into a class and the class tells me how terrible the project is I'm going to see, I watch it and I'm like, that wasn't that bad. Like, what do you so you are probably your own worst critic right now. We're going to look at the things that are messing up in this. And this one is one that got very technical, right? There was a lot of simulation stuff in it, a lot of little attributes to change, and a lot of the emails I got were stuff like that. Like they were like, Maya is exploding through my box, and it was like, did you set it to play every frame? And that would fix it, right? Or so there's so many little check marks to like remember. The thing about that is like I don't have like a to-do list when I'm doing these projects. Like this is something that you just eventually get familiar with, right? Anybody ever like drove a new car? Like it's like you were used to your old car and then suddenly you were driving either somebody else's car or you got a new one, right? Yeah, you ever tried to figure out how to get the windshield wipers to work in the new car, right?
No, it's just weird having brakes that actually work.
Oh yeah, those are important. You should like you should make sure you have those. That's what this is. I know that my car has windshield wipers, and I know that I'm going to need to use them. And just because I don't know like where the switch is, it this thing I turn, or is there a button, or is there something on my steering wheel now, or do I say, "Hey Siri, turn on the windshield wipers"? Like whatever that is, I really expected her to respond from my pocket just now, but she did. So I like just because like you still can't remember exactly where that button is or why the windshield wipers aren't on. That's just another problem for you to solve, right? Like you try stuff out until it starts to click. The problem with Maya right now is that you still are probably feeling a little like it's a little overwhelming. There's just a lot of stuff in it. And every day I introduce you to new things, and you're like, how am I supposed to memorize all of this? And you're not. Like you work through it, and eventually it gets there. And the working through it part gets less painful. Hopefully you're already recognizing that, because most of you are not struggling with moving an object now, right? Like, what's the shortcut key for that? The move tool.
Right?
W, right? Or some of you maybe aren't using the shortcut key. Maybe you're still going up to the little button on the side. However, the person who came into this class at the beginning of the semester fought with that a lot, right? Like the first day we opened it up, I'm sure you remember trying to tumble around and being like, I gotta use more than one finger, it's hard, right? Like that part gets easier. The rest of this does too. So just keep fighting with it. Take a deep breath, into the nose, out through the mouth. I'm guessing you all probably need a nap after this weekend. Get a nap. It will start to look better after this critique, okay? In fact, what I've noticed is all of the projects I've ever worked on that like drive me crazy, if I just give them a few months and look back at it, usually I'm like, oh, that's not so bad. I can fix that really easy. I just make these couple changes and it'll be done. So, the fact that there are so many seemingly finished projects in this folder right now is actually really encouraging to me. Let's watch them. Okay, we're going to watch them just the first time through for fun. And then the second time through, we'll start looking for things, or maybe we'll even chat about things that kind of stuck out to you the first time through. And then the second time through, we're going to start looking for things to improve, or looking for things that we could, as a class, like different notes that will help people. So I think everybody's probably got theirs up there. I'm going to go ahead and pull the entire folder down. If anybody drops something in there a little late, let me know and I'll pull it down too. Or, yeah. Anybody need sound? I got sound on theirs? Oh, all right. So let's go ahead and pause this for a second, get this up. I wish I could put that on a different screen. Can I turn this off? I can. Nice. Okay. So I'm going to double click on them. We're going to watch them all the way through. There's 21 of them. It's going to be fun. Here we go. portable brand. All right. Yes.
The one, I just want to say the one with the apology before it.
Yeah.
That was one of the better ones.
It's not as bad as you always think it is, right? Like it's really, I the things that you all see as something wrong with it, a lot of times people are not even going to notice that, right? And the other thing that you have, like I call it snow blindness. The other thing that you have is you are privy to the knowledge that you struggled with it for a long time, right? I went to a comic book store. It's my favorite comic book store, but I was talking to the guy who runs it and was telling him I do animation. He's like, oh yeah, animation takes like forever, right? He's like, it probably takes you like a week to do 10 minutes of animation, doesn't it? I'm like, like it takes me a week to do 10 seconds of animation. People have no idea how hard you work at this, and that is something that you probably should be a little better at, like spreading the word on that. This isn't easy. That's also why you will sometimes see job posts that say, hey, I have $100 and I need a 30-minute animation. Who wants to work with me? And you're like, no, I do not. So, like, this is hard work. And what you have is knowledge of how hard you worked on it and how it's still not quite what you wanted it to be, right? So it must be a disaster. Like, the rest of us are seeing, like, some of us aren't even seeing those issues that you have with yours, right? Some of you are doing a really good job at distracting from any areas that are broken. Like you may have like your Steam may have like a glitch in it or something like that, and we don't notice that because we're watching your serial, right? Now that doesn't mean you don't go and fix that Steam, but it means that little glitch in the serial is not destroying this piece the way you may think it is, right? Actually, I think these turned out really good. A couple of the elephant in the room notes. Make sure you get it rendered just for in terms of grade. That way, I have a gradable item on that. And so that would be like one of the first things to do is, after this class, try to finish up the renders on that. I think that the simulations on the serial turned out really good. I think almost everybody had a serial simulation. Of course, there's little things that we can tweak on those to make them better. There were a couple of them where one piece of cereal would choke a person. There's some of them that was a bowl full of BBs. And so, like maybe a little bit of some scale issues and stuff. There's always a couple of pieces of cereal that are a little too glossy. Cereal usually a little bit rough. And most people aren't noticing that until they render it. And so that just means turn down your specular on your cereal piece. And it usually fixes that. So a couple of easy fixes. Before we talk about the things to fix, let's talk about the things we liked. What's something that stuck out to you?
I liked one, I can't remember whose it was or what it was, but it seemed like they got sick of the cereal and just threw it. Can't relate.
Yeah, there's always a couple which are just like, I get the impression that they were trying to pour the cereal in the bowl and it got really frustrating and they were just like, I'm just going to animate it everywhere and make it go everywhere. So, yeah, what's something that kind of
I
stuck?
liked when I got to see
Yeah, that one was like, so think about like, one of the 12 principles was appeal, right? And no matter how good it looks, like no matter how good the models and the texturing and the lighting look, to watch a beautiful box of cereal pour into a beautiful bowl for a long time sometimes doesn't keep our attention, right? You need to be able to like keep the audience entertained. And that one was one that was kind of neat on the concept, right? Like, to the point that I was a little bit distracted from the rest of the simulation just because I kind of fell into the story. It was like, oh, I get it. It's like you're kind of going for like, it's the poor college kid cereal, and like the bowl only fills up partially, and then they look inside of it, and I'm like, that has like a story to it. Just out of curiosity, who was that? Yeah. Like that was solid. Like even if there was a mistake somewhere in the modeling or whatever, like we were like your appeal like slider was turned way up on that one, right? Like that has like a story to it, and like if somebody was like, tell me about one of them, a lot of times that's the thing that catches you. Now that doesn't carry all the weight for it, right? It also like if it wasn't also like pretty good on all the other regards, it maybe would have sort of fallen through the cracks, right? Or not fallen through the cracks, but just not been as memorable. So I think that like it helps that that one was also solid in a lot of the technical, and there wasn't anything bad to distract us from it, right? There may be things to improve on it, but there wasn't anything bad that was like, oh, that one would have been good if it had texture on some other stuff too, or if the bowl looked like a bowl. Like it all looked pretty good. So that's something to remember, that appeal was there because people want to be entertained. Like that's why we're doing this, is to keep people's attention. So, what's some other ones that kind of caught your attention? Like it doesn't have to be for like a cool concept. It could have been just like you liked how something looked in it, like a model or a texture.
I liked the one where the bread came to life, but it kind of like wobbled like it didn't have bones.
Yeah.
Like I liked that one. It just got up and it was like,
And it
kept walking. It was like,
yeah. I like that like, it pushes the cereal box over. Like that one to me is entertaining. It's appealing in the motion, right? Like the different objects move in different ways. Because not only did that bread sort of like flop up against the box to push it, when the box tipped over, it was like clunk. Like it was like a really like sharp, fast motion, and like all of the motion had some appeal to it. So, anybody? Oh yeah.
I really like the texture work on the one that's like I think the cereal was Sugar Bombs, like it was based on like the Fallout games or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I really love the texturing on that. It looked great.
It had a lot of like grittiness to it, right? Yeah. Was it that one like frame that it kind of jumped in? Was it that
It
one?
almost looked like I did it on purpose. So
Yeah.
But yeah, that was not intentional.
Yeah, I think there was I will say, a lot of times in this class, people over animate the camera, and I get a little motion sick. There weren't very many like bad offenders on that one in this one. There were some where maybe the camera moved just a little too long or a little too many angles, but like your camera is something that should be like if it's drawing attention to itself, it's doing it wrong, right? The camera is just there to make sure that the audience sees the things that you want the audience to see. There was one, I don't remember who's, I wasn't really paying attention to the names, where we were looking at the cereal, and then for just a few frames, we kind of panned away and we couldn't see the cereal anymore, and then we kind of came back to it. I think we kind of panned away to be able to see the steam. Like, that's something you have to watch out for. Make sure you, like, I wanted to keep watching the cereal, and suddenly, slowly the cereal just, like, went off frame, and I was like, I felt like I was kind of missing something. So that's where you kind of have to use your camera as like you have to be conscious of that. That's what you're doing is controlling what the audience gets to see, for both good and bad. That means if you have a part of your model or you have something in your scene that is not that good, you get to control how you show that to the audience, right? You can kind of hide that behind your cereal bowl and minimize some of the problems. Now that's not a fix as much as it's like, I'm in a hurry, I gotta get this. Let's sort of strategically place our camera. Like ideally what you do is you just fix that model, but sometimes you just run out of time, and it's about presentation of this. So, others that kind of caught your attention, like for good reasons? Yeah.
Speaking of camera, there was one where it was like the camera was coming over, but it was almost like it wasn't used as a camera, but as like a person, like first point of view, because like it did something as if like the person was sitting down, like
Yeah.
it went like that and then down, and then it was just stationary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was that the empty box one? I thought it was. Yeah, I remember thinking that. Yeah, I think that helps add to that idea, because otherwise it's just like the box turned around, like maybe it's not as clear. So it's all about yeah. I like that too. Something I think is interesting. Like, this is the first time I've done this project where I give you the cereal box and we get to focus as much as we did on UVs. How many of you like UVs? Ooh, really? That's interesting.
It depends.
You,
Like, I didn't do it the way that you told us to do it, but I was like, it worked, so I just went with it.
I think to me, UVs are that thing where it's like, they're not, like, sometimes it's really boring or frustrating to get it to unwrap the way you want it, but it's so gratifying to see good textures on your model, right? Yeah.
Even though my textures are, invisible.
Yes.
They're not invisible. It's just that
It's so
part of that
static.
SpongeBob episode where everything is metallic.
Oh, yes.
It's the metallic world.
But I took them like one at a time, like in Photoshop, because I couldn't get a line up right. So I took the images one at a time from the image I got and just placed them in there and resized them.
Mhm.
And it worked out pretty good.
If I didn't know how to use Photoshop, the UV thing would have been such a disaster.
Oh yeah,
It
same
helps a
here.
lot.
Yeah.
Like for me, like creating them, like for the cereal box, I found the image I have for the actual brand
Mhm.
online. I would not have been able to make that, but actually, like putting the UV together, that part I enjoyed.
So I noticed there was a lot of people who seem to have made their own cereal box. How many of you made your own cereal box material? So a handful of people did. Am I guessing correctly? And that means like you also, if you're taking the principles of visualization class, you're liking that? Anybody? Because that's what a lot of that is like visualization is that kind of design of layout and visual communication, right? If you're really enjoying just the creating textures part, like I'm really curious how visualization goes for you, how the principles of visualization class goes for you, because that's where a lot of that is, and a lot of people start gravitating toward that. There's still 3D elements in visualization, and we'll talk about that a little bit more actually next class period. How many of you like the modeling? So this is the hard part. If you're liking the modeling, animation may not be the exact place to get the most of that, right? A lot of the classes where you get to model the most are in the game design concentration. And a lot of people hear that and be like, but I don't like scripting. You can get through the game design concentration with only a minimal amount of scripting. There is that one coding class you have to take. But that is something to think about. The reason for that is because there's so many projects that need models in game design. And so it's not that game design is the home for modeling. There's also lots of opportunities for modeling in animation and visualization. But if you absolutely hate the animation part, like setting keyframes or simulating stuff, don't do the animation concentration thinking you're going to fill up the rest of those classes with modeling. Like game design is probably going to be a little bit better. So we're going to have a whole class next semester or next class period where we talk about all of this. How many of you like the simulating the cereal part? Anybody? One person.
I like the results of the simulation.
Yeah, it's tedious, right? It's very it's got a lot of little like things you have to do to get it the way you want it to look. But it's kind of neat too, right? Like you're getting a lot of animation kind of for free. Yeah.
When I did my cereal test, that one missed the cereal bowl,
Mhm.
but before I had animated the fork,
Mhm.
it had done just fine. It filled the bowl without any escaping, but as soon as I animated And it did that a few times on other things too, like the cup and the other stuff, the steam. It would just change.
Even if the fork wasn't interacting with it, right? Yeah,
I don't understand why.
I don't either.
Makes sense.
Maya's weird. Like, so in theory, every time you run that simulation in Maya, it can simulate it slightly different, right? Like in the real world, I think there are so many small variations that's like, if I throw this ball exactly the same every time, like that's not even possible, right? I would never be able to throw a ball the same way twice. In Maya, you would think that it is, but apparently there's very subtle variations that can cause each simulation to be slightly different. And that's why when we get the one we like, we're like, cache it. Like you got to cache it out and get it to work. But if you're going to have the fork interact with it, then it could be an issue. So yeah, when you cache it, that allows you to save that simulation in exactly the way you want it. And then you can animate the fork after that to hopefully fix that. But again, if like the fork was going to like jump into the bowl full of cereal, then you can't really cache it until after that happens. So, okay. I'm enjoying these. I know you all are exhausted, but I'm actually really. I think that these turned out way better than again, way better than you were making me think they were going to. So let's watch them again. This time, let's look for opportunities to improve. Right, things that you are catching beyond those like I mentioned, elephants in the room. Like it's not rendered. Look for things that you could improve on it that would just make that piece better, right? We don't have to call them out one at a time, but we can call them out one at a time. If there's one you're like, oh, on that one, the cereal box was floating, could you go back to it? I don't mind doing that, and that way we can see that as an example. And if anybody in the room wants feedback on a specific thing, feel free to call your own out and say, hey, would you check mine out and tell me if X is working, right? Or X is, do you notice that this is broken, right? So let's go ahead and watch through them one more time, kind of refresh our memories here, and just sort of look for things that could be improved. Because if it could be improved on one, there's a chance it could be improved on several. And so just that note may help somebody make theirs better. So here we go. I'm going to make some quick notes. I think it's locking up on me. Let me close it and reopen it. It seems to do that on. What's happening? Alright. So what's some stuff y'all noticed?
I noticed on a couple there were some that the textures were really inconsistent. Like there were some that they clearly spent a lot of time on certain textures and then just kind of threw others together in the last minute. And I don't know if that was like they just couldn't figure them out or ran out of time, but
Yeah.
like there was the one that's like I think it's the Cutler Crunch. The texture on the knife is and like the table and stuff is beautiful, and the sausage looked like a brown lump.
Yeah, so I gained some form of like
Yeah.
variation in there. Yeah, and I think that so here's something that's interesting about that is that there are others where there's very few textures at all. Like there's just lots of glossy material, maybe not glossy, but materials that seem like they were done correctly. Like the like a silver looking fork and a nice ceramic plate. There's no textures on that at all. Sometimes it's like inconsistency, I think is the right word, right? That when you raise the bar on one object and make an object look almost photoreal, then we expect the rest of the scene to seem that way too, right? And so I think you kind of have to balance that out in terms of an entire style, like what style are you going for? Where some people like maybe didn't use a ton of textures, but we're going for a much more cartoony style. And I think that's cool too. Like it's all about the aesthetic of how you do it. Keep in mind, like not everything has to have a texture on it. Not everything has to be UV'd. It's kind of like what is it going to look like in the final render, and how can you get that in the most efficient way. So, other things you saw that can be improved.
This is just being very nitpicky, but for some of them, the brand of cereal, like what comes out of the box, is not like what it looks like in the bowl. And like, again, being like nitpicky, I'm looking at like just like that's not Fruity Pebbles, that's Kick cereal, like.
Yeah, I think I'm going to. I've actually been collecting my cereal boxes, and I'm going to scan all of them in for future classes, and that way you have some stuff to pick from. But I think that means I have to change it a little bit to show you how to be able to do. If you want to do Frosted Flakes, how can we simulate Frosted Flakes? And it's hard. It's a little bit of a different process, but I think that's what I'm gonna do. So yes.
Is there a way to change the colors of randomize what color comes
To randomize on the cereal?
Yeah.
There is. I noticed a couple of people had it's the peanut butter, the Reese's cereal that had two different kinds. How did you? Who was that? How did you do that?
I just did 2 simulations.
just two like you had like a dark one and a
Yeah.
peanut butter and a chocolate one simulating into the
Yeah.
bowl, so that way they kind of mix together and pour out. I think there's a way that you can change a lot of different attributes for each particle per particle, and so you could have it to where every particle is a different color. It just requires a little bit of extra scripting in the inside of the thing. Yes.
I think there's actually a setting you can just do in Maya where it's like a hue jitter, because I remember seeing that as I was going through particle
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, there's a per particle attribute for a lot of different things. Let me see if I can create a. And then if you go look at the M particle here, as we get down here to the lower stuff, like so there's like shading. Oh yeah, there it is. Per particle array attributes, and so there's things you can change about them in terms of their velocity and everything like that. But there's a lot of different things that you can add that just apply to individual particles, and this is how we get some rotation out of it. But it's weird. Like it's when Maya's simulating it, it's simulating a dot, not the shape of your cereal. And so getting it to simulate that rolling is kind of the hard part, or getting to simulate, like if you did a Cheerio, Maya still wants to simulate it as if it's a sphere, right? And getting it to roll the right way or like collapse together the right way just can be a little bit more difficult. So I was kind of hoping people would just kind of like suspend disbelief and be like, Mom filled up the Frosted Flakes box with fruity pebbles and sort of fruity cocoa puffs. Yeah, so other things that you that kind of caught your attention? I made some notes. I'm just thinking for y'all. All kind of little things. So the one that kind of stuck out to me a little bit, there was a couple things. One was I kind of mentioned the camera earlier, right? There were some of them where we were kind of wasting some of our camera space, right? Actually, I think the first few were just a little too far away, right? Like if we look at this, like there's so much neat stuff going on here, yet I'm still like looking like a big portion of my screen is being taken up by this stuff that has no added information, right? So just pushing the camera in there closer, I think would make this one a really strong piece. Now eventually the camera gets over there, but there's just a lot of time where like even at this, like the cereal's tiny in there and we're so far away from the steam that we can just barely see it there. So I think that this could just be stronger just by pushing the camera a little closer. And I kind of saw the same thing with this one a little bit. Like we could just get in there. It makes the scene feel a little more empty because we're so far away, and just to be in there a little closer would just help it. So, any other things that you all were seeing that kind of stuck out to you? Good or bad?
I think I made my cereal box too glossy.
Right. Glossy is on my thing here. Like there's just a handful of things that like Maya by default, when you make an AI standard surface, it makes it shiny. And so you to make it not glossy, you have to pull it down or play with that. The materials are on there, and how they look in the viewport will give you a starting point, but that's rarely enough. Like you need to do some test renders to see, is it too glossy? Does it need some other attribute applied to it? And so doing a little bit of work on that just to kind of go through and make sure things are consistently glossy or specular is correct on that. So.
It's like you make something matte and you have the camera, like the light facing directly at it. Will it? I don't know exactly what I'm asking. Will it just like light it up entirely, or will still?
Yeah. So there will be a fall off around it. So like if you look at, you can kind of see it on my water bottle. It's glossy, but like as you go around the edge of an object, or as an object kind of falls off around the edge, the way the light bounces off of it will change. What it won't give you is, we call them specular highlights. It's anything where you can kind of see like an elongated or a shaped piece of part of gloss, right?
Yeah.
And you can have, like, my water bottle isn't glossy, but it still has highlights. They're just rough highlights. So that's where that roughness under your specular comes in. It makes it kind of diffuse out. I'm trying to find an example of that. I mean, I guess the bottle is a good one. Can everybody see the back of my monitor? It kind of has that. It has specular on it, but it is it's diffusing out to where it's like I can't see my reflection in the back of my monitor, right? So that's probably what that's going to do. If you take the specular all the way off, it's going to be something more like the wall here, right? This is probably a matte paint, so there's not any highlights on that. I say that there's a little bit of gloss on the back of it, but it'll be something like that. So,
Yeah.
Other comments, things you saw? Y'all getting tired? It's the lights being low, isn't it? It's a long weekend for all of us. Couple of things I kind of noticed. I'll just toss them out there kind of quickly. Timing on stuff. Like, some stuff was a little slow, some stuff was a little fast. Like, making a conscious effort to, is that the correct timing for something? Scale is kind of another thing. Some people's cereal box, some people's coffee cup was maybe like half the size of their cereal box, and then their bowl was like half the size of their coffee cup. And so just kind of looking at some actual objects and trying to getting them to the appropriate scale. And then this one's always kind of an interesting one. There was a lot of like flat forks and spoons, and so looking at reference of those things, like they have curves to them, and trying to get those curves correct will just make it a little bit more believable. Again, a lot of this stuff is we're setting a scene, right? Like we've made a scene, and even if those objects are not going to play a part in the action, they're still part of making the environment feel believable, right? What you're wanting is for the audience to forget they're watching an animation and just sort of fall into your story of whatever it is you're showing them. If anything that they see like takes them out of that, makes them go, wait, that's not what a fork looks like, then you kind of broke that illusion, and then the magic trick's over, and then they just start looking for other things that will be wrong. So something like that is just something like getting it to where the fork doesn't distract them as being unrealistic. So, I love this project because one last small thing, the samples on the lights, like there's a couple of pieces where you can kind of see like the shadows or the highlights are just a little grainy, and that's just another render thing. I love this project. I know it's a hard one. And it throws a lot at you. Like there's just a lot of things you have to do in this one to fight through. The cool thing about this is if you go back to Project 1 now, if you go back to your bridge, y'all remember that one? Yeah. How many of you think you could do that one better now? Yeah. So do it better. Like go back and make that one better. Again, we're going to talk next class period about sort of job opportunities in this and midpoint review. It's going to be more of a discussion day. And really, more than anything, it's a question and answer day because you should have tons and tons of questions about what midpoint review is, what you need to do. And it's a big deal. We need to kind of have a day where we talk about that. But I think it directly relates to careers, right? Did anybody go and listen to Mark Thomas talk?
Ironically, I was too busy playing with all that 76 beta.
That's interesting. So what did you think?
It was really interesting. He talked about how it took him a long time to get his foot in the door.
Oh
Yeah. He was talking about how he was like delivering pizzas and working at like Petco or something for years after he graduated, and until he eventually got his foot in the door at like Firaxis, and then he moved on to Bethesda.
Yeah.
To work on the creatures.
Yeah, he was because me and him both went to Animation Mentor at slightly different times. I think I graduated as he was coming in, and he got hired on there for a contract position, which means it's full time in terms of hours, but it's not got the benefits. It's just pay per hour. And they wanted to be able to hire him there full time. They just didn't have an open position for him, and he got hired on at Bethesda after working there for I think about a year on some of the XCOM stuff. So this sort of stuff is where you're like, you all are getting to a point now where you're going to start thinking, oh, maybe I want to do this for a living, right? Maybe like maybe you discover that in one of these projects. Maybe you're like, oh, well, like lighting and rendering is fun to me. Maybe somebody would pay me thousands of dollars a year to do that, and yes, they will. You're going to start discovering these things and sort of laying out a pathway to that career is not very simple all the time. Like there's specific classes you would probably want to take. There's specific ways of making that career path easier for you. So be thinking about that. And anytime we have a professional talking to you, like that's a huge opportunity just to be able to ask somebody who is doing the job you want someday questions about how they did that or how they got there. No, they're not always at convenient times. That's a reason to get involved in Edge Club, is because then you can control when those times happen. Like determining when the meetings were is part of Edge's one of their first few meetings that they have. So anybody in here in Edge Club or no? Yeah, cool. Y'all ought to get involved in that. Like there's a lot of really cool things that they do, and if they're not doing the things that you're wanting to do, get involved in Edge Club and make them do those things. Yes.
I do Edge Club because every single one of the meetings and every single one of the things they're holding is running class.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that's not going to be the case next semester. You have a class at 8:15 p.m.?
On Thursdays, yeah, I'm getting out of class at 8:30.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a physics lab.
Okay, I got you. Yeah. At one point they were doing them on Fridays, and people were leaving town to go home on Fridays, so they couldn't get enough people to come out for them. So, that's a good thing to early on try to at least talk to one of the officers from Edge and say, I really can't do it at these times. I know one of the reasons that time is because it's right after the portfolio class, and the president, Catherine, is in portfolio, so that's the only time she could really do it. Okay.
I was just going to point out that you don't have to actually be a member to go to meetings, in case
Oh.
anyone's confused about that. You just have to be a digital media student. You can show up, and paying the fees are optional. All it really does is it gets you materials for when they do contests and stuff like that.
Yeah. And the fees aren't super expensive.
It's $10 for a year.
Yeah, $10 for a year. Yeah, absolutely. I would say test drive it. Show up to one of the meetings and just ask questions. Especially you could probably go half a semester before anybody's like, "Are you a member?" And you could be like, "No, just hanging out," and nobody would probably really say anything. But at that point, if you're that involved, you'll probably want to pay your dues and actually get more involved. So, an interesting thing about this, for those of you who didn't show up to this, Mark Thomas gave everybody his email, to send him work and ask him for feedback. I know students who are already talking to him personally, and that is one of the biggest ways you get a job, is that you make a connection. I think it's something like 70% of all new jobs come from a connection or a personal relationship with somebody. I know people who got jobs because they contacted me out of the blue and said, "Hey, I really want to work at Firaxis. Would you look at my demo reel?" And then Firaxis said, "Hey, we're hiring a person who does exactly what that person does, and we'll give you a $3,000 bonus if we hire the person you recommend." So I recommended them, right? This is a way of doing that. Sending emails out of the blue. Obviously be polite, but we're trying to open up opportunities for you all to meet people who may give you a leg up. So yeah, I get it though. It's a little intimidating. So it's not like nobody's going to force you to ask them a question. Like, just go listen and see what other people are saying. So.
Definitely not proud of my time management.
It's not going to be the last one, though. We try to do at least 4 of these a semester if we can. I'm not for sure who the last one is right now. It may be kind of falling through the cracks, and we may not have that last one. But I'll check with Catherine. If so, it'll pop up on the screen here in the next couple of days. Okay. So, I want to do one more thing. In the name of trying to give you actually it's kind of 2 more things. In the name of trying to give you as much time on your final as possible, I want to go ahead and announce it today. I want to go ahead and give you the explanation of what the final project is going to be. Before I do that, though, this was really pretty good work. You should be proud of this. Yes, I'm sure you all have opportunities to make improvements on this. If you want to make a revision on this and put it in there by next class period, I will hold off on grading it until then. I'm actually a little behind on the grading anyway. I think I still need to get the grades for project 2. So go ahead and if you want to do a revision on this by next class, do it. I'd love to see any changes you make on it or anything that you just didn't feel like you got done. Do that. Otherwise, give yourselves a hand. This was good work. You should be proud of this. Okay. So, let's talk about our final. How many of you, this is your first semester at ETSU? Okay. So, this is going to start happening in a lot of your classes. I'm trying to get my finals assigned as early as possible this semester. So, today we are right there. So, you can actually see we're 1 day behind of where I wanted to start my final. So, we're on the 12th. Next class period is when we're going to be doing the jobs talk, which is also the midpoint review talk. But today we're going to go ahead and kick off the final. I say kick it off. It's been on D2L the entire time. You all have probably read ahead on this. But if we're starting here, right, we have quite a few weeks. We have actually exactly a month to get to our final. If you've never, again, I know this is sort of to some of you, this is your first time through this. The last week of class, which is the 10th, December 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th, right? That Friday, there's just no school. Class is over on Thursday. That last week of class is finals week, which means nobody is teaching anything. You're just having your finals. For every hour slot of time you have in class, like this class is 2 hours long, right? Not every hour. Every class section, because I guess Tuesday and Thursday classes are longer. So for every class section that you have on a daily basis regularly, you get the option of a finals time, right? So this class takes up 2 class periods, right? It's 2 hours long on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That means we get 2 to pick from. And it's always either Monday the 10th or December the 12th. Sorry, Wednesday the 12th, right? So I always leave that up to you to vote on. So we'll pull that up here in just a second and talk about it. I'll be honest, I don't know that I've ever had a class vote that voted for the earlier time, because basically they just want more time to work on it. But I could be surprised. Couple of things to notice. We have this week with Thanksgiving in it coming up next week. Dude, that's like the least productive week of your life. Nobody's going to get very much of anything done. So even though we have a month there, it's going to be really hard for you to get all of this done super smoothly. On Monday of that month or of that week, I am going to be talking a little bit about the rigging. So let's go ahead and look at the project really quick, and then we'll kind of come back to the schedule. So I've zoomed in way too much. Zoom out a little bit. So the final, I call it bot. It doesn't have to be a robot. It just has to be a 2-legged creature. A robot will actually make this a little easier for you. Let's talk about it here. So why are we doing this? You benefit and grow more from guided work time than any other type of learning. So we're going to go ahead and take one more large project together. I actually already have one created. make a robot model. I'm going to rig that robot model for animation, and then we're going to do a walk cycle with that robot where it takes at least 6 steps. Okay. So what you're going to do again, concept, you get to make up your own character, whatever you want it to be. We're going to model it. You get to model whatever character you want. We're going to UV it and texture it. We're going to light the scene. We can make a very simple environment for it. I mean, if you're loving modeling, you can go all out and model like a full environment. But it can just kind of be a simple scene. We're going to rig it. We're going to animate it, and we're going to render it. So I'm saying 2-legged robot for a couple of reasons. Mainly because I want to make this last month of your time here this semester as painless as possible. I want you to not be miserable on the day of your final. I want you to have something you're excited about. So think Ed 209 from RoboCop. If you want to see an example of that, right? Just something that has 2 legs. If you want to put more on it, right, 2 legs and a head, or 2 legs and a torso, right? If you want to put more on it than that, you can, but I'm not going to be covering how to rig like arms or a tail or like a 6-legged creature in this class. I'm going to be showing you how to rig a 2-legged creature. Anything additional you put on that is sort of up to you to figure out the rigging. I'll help you with it one-on-one, but it can be more complicated than you might think. So this is sort of the base of what we're going for, a 2-legged creature. And I'll show you some examples here in a few minutes. So step 1, you're going to start by designing your own 2D concept of the character based on reference images and ideas you have. Your character should have 2 legs, a base/head, and no real additional limbs or spine. Right? Again, if you decide to put that on there, that's kind of on you to figure out how to do that. You can, however, add one small bobble or element to the base if you want, an antenna or something like that. Keep in mind, although you're not required to design a robot, a similar type of segmented model is advised, right? So here's the way to think of this, right? My arm has no, like, I can't take my arm off, right? Like, it's all one piece, right? I can't take my forearm off from my upper arm. It's all one, like, all of us. We're all one contiguous bag of skin, right? And when it comes time to rig that, that means we have to talk about how my elbow deforms, or how the skin deforms around my elbow, right, or around my knee. So if you're modeling a realistic creature, an organic creature, you have to deal with that a little bit. It's not impossible. It's not even really that hard, but that is something that it's one extra challenge in terms of rigging. If we're modeling a robot, each part of that it's a separate piece, right? So we just need to know where it pivots from, and then the skinning process for that is a little easier. Again, if you're okay with that, like, model whatever you want to. There's plenty of people who have done more fleshy objects, more like little demons or little, like, whatever, a chicken. All of that's okay, and I will show you the tools on how to do that. It's just a little bit of something else to kind of fight with. That's not a bad thing. Like, that's if that's something you're wanting to do, then yeah, go after that. Step 2, you're going to model, UV, and texture your character. So I have this listed. This phase will be 25% of your final grade, right? So the concept is sort of, you just need that to be able to model something, right? But 25% of the grade, or if we get on here to our thing here, one of our 5 categories, right, is modeling. Step 3, we'll rig your character together. This part is completed. This part is complicated and can break easily, so that is why that's why I'm implying you should be limited to a 2-leg and no additional limbs or spine. This will be another 25%. Step 4, we're going to animate a walk cycle with your new rig. We'll also go through the basics together, and I'll animate and rig a character along with you. But our character is going to take 6 steps. It's one of the most fundamental animations that you can do, a walk, but because we see people walking so much, like we see it every day of our lives, it's also one of the things that we can spot errors in very easily. So I'll go through the process on how we do that and sort of how we do pose-to-pose animation. Again, this is another 25% of the grade. And step 5, you're going to render your final shot. The stage, you'll need to give your character a basic background, environment, lights, and scenes. 25, what am I? This is the wrong number. That's the wrong number. It's going to be 20. Yeah, it's 20%. Sorry, I think that's hanging out there from a previous class. It should be 20. So it needs to be lit and rendered, basic background environment, and go ahead and put a camera in there maybe to get a little bit of motion just for depth. And so that's another 20%. And of course, the final deliverable has to be rendered. So if it's not fully rendered, it'll be an automatic 0 for the rendering section of that, which is lighting and rendering. And then I have this overall presentation category. This is like, how did you pull the whole thing together again, right? Again, like just talking about, are we looking at this from a quarter of a mile away? Is it like, I don't know, like there's just a lot of different things that go into the overall presentation. So 5 points, yeah. So basically this is 5 points each, a total of 25 points for the entire project, just like the, okay, sure, I'll make it one word. Okay, so anybody have any questions about what we're doing? So you're going to concept or sort of come up with your own character design, 2 legs. Preferably that's it, but you can go a little bit more if you want to. We're going to rig it, we're going to animate it, we're going to light it and render it, and then we're going to call it a semester and go home and take a really long nap, right? So, when is this due? This is something I leave to all of you. The final will be presented on blah. So we need to figure out when we're going to have this. Finals week is difficult because we don't meet at the regular time of class, right? We get a 2-hour time slot for every hour, or for every class section that we have here, right? So we currently, it's a 4 credit hour class, so it takes up 2 class sections. While we're in this one class, there's like 2 English classes that happen, right? And so if you actually go to the internets and type in ETSU final exam schedule fall 2018, it'll bring it up, right? And so here it is, it's a PDF. And what it does is it shows you if this is your regular class time, this is your exam time. It is really, really, really frowned upon and like potentially like reprimandable if a teacher has you do a final at a different time, right? So if you ever have that issue, like if you have some other teacher who's like, yeah, we're not having our final at that time, we're going to have it 2 hours earlier that day, that means that they're stepping on the toes of another final, right? Like they may be causing you to miss your chemistry final or something like that. So, so what we do is we just find our time slots, which right now is 8:15 to 11:05. I'm sorry, no, that's Monday. This is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, isn't it? 8:15 to 10:15, right? And so you'll see we get 2 time slots to choose from. Let's zoom in there where you can see it a little bit better. It can either be Wednesday at 3:50 p.m. or Monday at 8 a.m. So, again, Monday 8 a.m. I'm sorry, Monday 8 a.m. Wednesday at 3:50. Some pros and cons here. We choose Wednesday, you get 2 more days to work on your project. If you choose Monday, you may be finished with your finals by like Monday or Tuesday, and you're like, I can leave campus early, right? Like I'm done 2 days early. Anybody want to make an argument for one or the other? Yeah.
I'm gonna make an argument for because that's when we normally have classes.
Mhm.
So like you wouldn't be like really losing anything.
I mean, and you wouldn't forget.
I am making an argument for Monday as well because because the Wednesday is actually I don't want to be in here on my birthday.
Okay.
Oh, it's gonna be in this room, right? Or is it another
Yes.
room? Okay, if it's in this room and you forget what day it is, you just come into class normally and you'll be here anyways, because that's basically when our classes anyways. It's kind of impossible to forget that.
I think it was
Can I still come around about 15 minutes late? Because if so, my Monday's fine with me, but I don't know if I can get here at 8 o'clock. I'll try my best.
Okay. What are you gonna say?
Traffic's gonna be way worse at 3:50 than at 8 a.m.
That's
I mean, you're not
amazing.
wrong.
I've never seen this happen before. I think Maddie, did you have
I
anything?
was gonna pick Monday as well, just because again.
Okay.
I would say Monday because that gives me Wednesday to cram for my physics exam.
This is making me tired. Thinking about
Yes.
I was gonna say same as him, and also the semester sucks, and I'm ready for it to be over.
Okay. Okay, back here.
Wednesday at that time I might be working, so like I don't know.
That's the only thing.
Let's go with Monday.
Monday!
What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say Monday because I'm graduating.
Oh, wow. All right, let's take a vote. How many of you are voting for Monday 8 a.m.? How many of you are voting for Wednesday at 3:50?
I lost.
I have never seen that happen before. Wow. Like, it almost is always unanimous. Everybody votes for the later time to get extra time to work on the project. Yeah.
Having a birthday that always falls during finals week, it's like I've dealt with it for 2 years before, and I don't want to do it again.
Well, happy birthday. It is Monday at currently it's saying 8 a.m. So let's make it 8:30. Go ahead and legislate just a little later, okay? Because we're really just going to do what we did today. We're going to look at the projects. My finals are not a beat you up day. My finals are like, let's hang it on the refrigerator and talk about it day. Like, this should be a fun time. Since it's early, I'll try to bring some donuts. So, all right. So let's go ahead and put this down.
You look so shocked.
I am. Like, this is
Please
crazy.
tell me you were recording this.
I am. Like, I
We got
think.
this, we have a record.
I think I am. I never, like, this has never happened before. So, Monday, December 10th, 8:30 a.m. So, wait.
I can get here before 8:30. That's fine.
Well, let's say get here at 8, but we will aim at 8:30 as the time we get started. So, where is it at? Let's see, Monday, December 10th, 8:30 a.m. Okay. I want to put this in bold. If you have a calendar you use, put it in there now, because it is like, it is so, every semester I get bombarded the week before finals week with emails that say, hey Marlo, when is our final? And if I get that, I'm going to send you a Gumby GIF, okay? And that will remind you, oh yeah, Marlo said he was going to send me a Gumby GIF if I ask that. Where was that final written again? It's written in the document.
Well, now I want to ask you just so I can get a Gumby.
It always happens. I'll get a few.
Now I want the Gumby.
So,
You should just post up some Gumby gifts.
yeah.
The final is still in this class, right?
Yes, it'll be in this class here. So, add POA final 8:30. There we go. And
8 to 10 is the time slot.
actually, our class starts at 8:15. The actual time slot that they have listed is 8. And so really what I'm going to say is like, let's get started at 8:30. So if you want to show up at normal time, that'll give you that extra 15 minutes to get the file uploaded and like figure out where you put your jump drive and all that stuff. So 8. So, sorry, I'm editing stuff here. Windows POA final. It's in there. It's official. And congratulations, you all, on being the first class I've had in 6 years to choose the earliest possible final.
We're the special.
You are. Or
It's better to get it out of the way. Like get it earlier.
We're all gonna be
It's
prodigies
literally like
now.
the first day of the week.
I just want the extra time to cram for the harder exam.
this is. I mean, I need to make the project harder.
I just don't. I just
No.
don't want
No, I'm thinking.
I just don't want to have finals on my birthday.
I get you. So.
Compared to
It's
this,
a crappy
Huh?
present.
like
and I don't
compared
want
to physics, this is easy.
Okay.
it. Finals a crappy present. I don't want that.
Okay, that's cool. Congratulations, y'all. That's our final time. Great work on this project. Again, it can always be better, so keep working on it. Keep making revisions. I strongly encourage you all to consider submitting revisions for the first 2 projects as well. And I strongly encourage you all to be here next class period because we're going to be talking about some important stuff. For you all right now, what you need to be doing for the project is in about a week, I'm going to go ahead and start rigging my robot. So that means you need to be concepting and starting to model yours. One of the ways you can start finding ideas is Pinterest. I know, like, you think it's just crochet and cake decorations. Pinterest is awesome, actually. There is so much good resources out there.
It has the best drawing references.
Yeah, there's so many good things. And you can just start looking up anything else you find on, like, ArtStation, just to get ideas. If you like to draw, like, this is your chance to design something in this class, right? Design your own robot or 2-legged creature from scratch. It could be a 2-legged unicorn. Apparently, unicorns are in this year. They're everywhere. Yes.
Can I do a humanoid robot with its arms and head come?
Yes. Actually, people have done that before. One person did a torso that had been cut in half. So if you want to see some examples, under DIGM classes, if you go to Greg and you go to old right here, you can find all of my old classes. These may be removed relatively soon here. I need to back some of this up. But we can look at just last semester.
Oh no, please don't.
Well, we won't look at all of them. Therefore, robot. Let's see. Who was so good? So Wyatt was a good one. Okay. So, like, here's an example of sort of the extent that kind of expecting on this. Isn't he cute? Let's see. Who was another? Who was a good one? Sierra did some interesting ones. So she did put a head on that, right? That little, like, thing at the end. Couple others. I'm trying to remember. Alex had something.
I don't take these things so personal anymore.
You're fine. So this was an interesting
I don't
one.
take these things so personal anymore.
Yeah. Let's go back to another semester. I'm trying to remember one that would be a good one. What did Sarah do? I feel like Sarah's was good. I'm trying to remember now.
Sarah's
Oh,
is
yeah.
always
Yeah, this one was like a weird, creepy one. Like, but she did a lot of extra stuff on hers. Yeah, like she did some like hair in here, and that's like that was a lot of extra research on this. Jarrett's stuff is always good. Actually, his revised version is even better than this. Another place you can see some of this stuff is, so you can't really see it that well, but there's like a fork hiding behind that pillar. If you go up to ETSU E3 DIGM classes, the midpoint review, we're going to be looking at this a little bit later, but you can kind of see Jarrett's revision of that one, which even got better, I think. Yeah. So did a little bit of a better render, a little bit more lean on the walk cycle. You can see the fork a little bit better now. So, So this gives you some ideas of like sort of where the bar is and what you should be looking for. I feel like Jordan's was good. That's a cereal. Did he do? Yeah, Jordan didn't turn his in. Okay. Or maybe he did, and I'm not gonna go through all that. Cameron's I like. So Cameron just went for a full person, which I think is interesting. And there's another. It's Carissa. So I know we're getting close to the end of the class here if you're needing to hop out. But yeah. So Carissa gets a little extra on the environment here. Everything she does has so much personality in it. It's cool. And I will show you, I think there's another one in here that I thought was really, somebody mentioned, like, can you do a disembodied head? Was it Michael Regan? I don't think it was him. I'm trying to remember who it was. Nah, that one's okay. But, what was his name? Webb. Oh, that's Michael Webb. No, it's not that one either. Anyway, I can't remember the person who did it, but somebody did a disembodied like characters. Basically, they were chopped off at the waist. So feel free to browse around through some of these. We're actually going to be talking about this folder a little bit later to next class period to see that this is sort of what you're building up to for midpoint review. So, all right, I'll go ahead and let y'all go. Have a good class. I'll see you all Wednesday. And I'll upload the video of me being surprised. So, how's it going, sir?
Thank you.